going on? Blossom is back, and welcome back to another episode of Top Drives, where I want to kick off a short little series where I want to cover the cash cows, the money makers, the guap gurus, or the moolah moguls, whatever you want to call it. I want to talk about the cars that I use the most in clubs that get me the most money. These are the cars that I like to use in rotation all the time. These are cars that will easily get me value that I can rely on, that I can trust. These are cash cows, okay? And today we're going to kick off this new series with uncommons, and I'm going to go all the way up to epics. Because when it comes to legendaries, I feel like most of them, you probably know which are the ones that can get you value. Basically anything that handles well or has good MRA or that isn't a Volkswagen, Bentley, or Lamborghini, you should do just fine. Actually, there are some Lamborghinis that are really good for clubs, but they're all the high-end ones. But anyway, I want to start off with the cash cows, talking about uncommons all the way up to epics. I'm not going to talk about commons because I'm going to be honest with you, okay? Quick tip. If you want to play clubs and you don't want to see me, just play when they're common in clubs, when they're common requirements in clubs. Whenever I see common requirements in clubs, I'm out. I don't play. I absolutely hate the common meta. It is just a pain in the ass. I mean, to be completely honest with you, when it comes to commons, for the rain, you use RQ19 Fiesta. For the dry, you use like Monte Carlo for drag, and then you want to use like the Suzuki Alto or whatever, the K works for everything else. That's basically all I see for the common ranks. I do not enjoy playing with commons at all. So I don't think that I'm in a good position to talk about commons, and therefore I'm not going to, because the last thing I want to do is just give out BS information. So let's proceed. So we go into status and we go into wish listed and we go into all cars at 69. That was actually unintentional. And I want to show you all the cars that I think are the best cash cows. Now, a lot of these cars will probably go hand in hand with Blossom Choice, but this basically broadens the list a lot more. You're going to see a bunch of cars in here that aren't really Blossom Choice because they're not very useful in multiplayer events, but because of their niches and what they bring to the table with what they are, they bring a lot of value just to clubs. So I want to talk about clubs real quick. I want to talk about the common niches and the things that you never see, okay? So there's always a bias in clubs. That's the first thing you need to know. When you go into clubs, there's always a bias towards a certain set of cars. And that bias are basically cars that fall under these niches. So these are events that you see in clubs all the time. Front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, 5-seater, saloon, country from the big six. So basically the UK, honestly we never see the US, but US, UK, Germany, Italy, Japan, and France. Those are the ones that you see. You don't see Sweden, none of that. None Australia, no Croatia, none of that. We see all surface tires, standard tires, performance tires, petrol cars, 2-seaters, and anything before Italian Renaissance. Actually, anything Italian Renaissance and before. So pre-IR updates, including IR. So IR and before, basically. And then additional niches to watch out for a niche are medium ground clearance cars, off-road tire cars, specialists, and cars that handle really well. So those are the bias, right? Because here are the things, like if your car, now I want to talk about the uncommon niches. And when I mean uncommon niches, I mean the niches that never show up. So if you have a car that fall under these negative niches, they're going to be less useful in clubs than cars that do have these niches, okay? So let me tell you about the things that never show up in clubs. 5x 4-seaters, or anything to do with 4-seaters, a country that isn't from the big six, 1-seaters, electric, hybrid, or other fuels. Now, I know that there is x5 eco-friendly, but that shows up once every 3 months, like one time a season, okay? Also, anything after Italian Renaissance, so European Revolution, Great Exhibition, American Frontier, all these things you're never going to see in clubs. That being said though, you know, when it's Japan x5, it's usually JPT nowadays, and when it's USA x5, you can use some American Frontier cars, but what I'm saying is that in clubs you will never see x5 American Frontier, x5 GE, nothing past Italian Renaissance, and I don't think we'll ever see that. You know why? Because Hutch doesn't care about clubs, okay? So many times I have talked to the team at Hutch about how to improve clubs, and they're just like, oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, we'll work on it in the future. It's been freaking 2 years. They don't care about clubs. So whatever new update is coming to Top Drives, never expect to see it in clubs. Hutch does not care about clubs. They do not care about it at all. So basically anything post-Italian Renaissance you won't see in clubs. Coupes, estates, hatchbacks, you never see those requirements in clubs. So if your car is a 5-seater, if your car is a saloon, you automatically have more value in that car than a car that is a coupe and or a hatchback or an estate, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's get into it. Cash cows for the uncommon rank. So I want to start off with the Voxel HP Forensic. This is my go-to low RQ medium ground clearance car. Now, for the entirety of this series, when I mean low RQ, medium RQ, and high RQ, what I mean is that the RQs within the rarity. So a low RQ would be RQ20 for an uncommon. A mid RQ would be like RQ25, and a high RQ would be RQ29. So I hope that makes sense. So this is my low RQ medium ground clearance performance tire car. This is my low RQ medium ground clearance standard tire car. Now, they have two things in common, right? They're both medium, they're both light. They have three things in common, actually. They're both medium, they're both light, and they both handle very well. I will show you my personal cars afterwards. I can just click my cars and you would see all of the max. But, you know, just so I don't show you any duplicates and it looks nice and organized, I will show you just the wish-listed version. The Mercedes-Benz 300 SL is my go-to low RQ dragster, mainly used for the testable and the 1 mile. When you put it on the quarter mile and the half mile, it will tank you some points. But on the testable and the 1 mile, it is a reliable car to use, especially if you want to save RQ. Then we have the Datsun 240Z. This is going to be the low ground clearance version of the Voxel Hp Forensic. The only reason is because it's my go-to low ground clearance uncommon car. But when you look at the stats, 9894, 7573, you're really just going for the handling in this because the Forensic actually has a much lower 0 to 60 with the same top speed. The Chevrolet Cruze is once again the American version of the Colt. It handles very well, standard tires, medium ground clearance, and it's also a saloon. If I do believe myself correctly, this is a hatchback, so this one doesn't count. Yeah, it is a hatchback. So this one has that additional saloon niche. Moving on now is the Nissan Ex8 Turbo M12. This is a car that I use a lot in clubs as well, which is a bit of a surprise. This isn't a car that I thought I would use a lot in clubs, but in the end, I kind of do. The main thing about it is because it has a very low 0 to 60, but it maintains decent handling. Now, it's not as good as a Datsun 240Z, but when you look at the 0 to 60 difference, it's 9.8 to 8.5. This is my go-to like low ground clearance, low RQ uncommon. So this and the Datsun 240Z. So basically, if I can use a 21, I'd use the EXA. If I can use a 20, I'll use a Datsun. If I can only use a 20, I'll use a Datsun. And if I can use a 22, then we move up to the Dodge Daytona Turbo Z. So these three cars are cars to take note of. Once again, it handles well, a low 0 to 60. It's one of my go-to low ground clearance cash cows when it comes to clubs and also in American events as well. Moving on is the AutoZam. Of course, it's really, really good because it handles very well and it has standard tires. It is low ground clearance, but the amazing handling on this kind of stands out. Also, it is a very lightweight car. One thing you would notice that a lot of these cars in here are actually very lightweight. The TVR Timar comes next. 8.2 0 to 60, 74 handling. It's a great little hybrid. This is my go-to hybrid low RQ uncommon. Once again, it is very light. And then we have the Nissan Navera. So why is the Nissan Navera here? Well, rear wheel drive is one of the most common requirements in clubs. And when it comes to clubs, they're usually, like I said, Hutch doesn't care about clubs, so sometimes it's 2, and they won't change it because, you know, Hutch doesn't care. You know that Will Smith slapping meme? I'll put a picture right there. That's basically how Hutch feels about clubs. But the Nissan Navera D22, it is useful when it is rear-wheel drive ×5, and there's an off-road track set like Road Less Taken, and there's always going to be an off-road track set. It's either going to be Road Less Taken, or a Circuit Breaker, or a Storm Chaser, or Desert Sands, or Grand Canyon. And if the RQ limit is really freaking low, where you can't use a Lancia 037 or a Porsche 924 Carrera GTS, whatever it's called, rally spec, then the Nissan Navera might be a pretty good one for you to use. Or, better yet, if the requirements are all surface tires ×5 in clubs, and the RQ limit is very, very low, where you can't use a super rare or a rare, and you're basically only using commons, then the Nissan Navera is a pretty good one. Actually, another niche that the Navera is good for is if it's all surface tire ×5, and the track set is all dry. Because when you think about it, the 4-wheel drive cars, they have really, really bad handling, really, really bad 0 to 60s. The only reason why they're higher in RQ is because they are 4-wheel drive and all surface tires. So the Nissan Navera kind of, if it makes sense, it actually brings the stats of a high RQ uncommon in terms of its 0 to 60 and handling. The only reason it isn't a high RQ uncommon is because it's rear-wheel drive instead of 4-wheel drive, because 4-wheel drive inflates everything, you know what I mean? So this is a good RQ saver to use in all surface tire events and clubs, especially when it comes to the dry, but also like if you want to just save RQ and there's not a lot of options to use, then the Navera is a decent car to use. Like I said, it's a very niche situation. It's never going to be Blossom Choice, but it's a good car from clubs, for clubs. Moving on is the Nissan Leaf Nismo, medium ground clearance, amazing handling, and a low 0 to 60. This is one of those cars where you kind of always want to make a space for. Like, I know that there are some decent medium cars, like the Voxel Forensic, for example, but most players would always try and sacrifice 2 RQ somewhere else just to make the Nissan Leaf Nismo fit. And therefore, even though you get a great bargain out of the Forensic, the Nismo Leaf is so much better because it is the best. In the city streets, I believe medium, and when it comes to city streets small, the best car is the Micra, which is also in this list. Fantastic little beast. It's a great car for hairpin twisty. You can put it on a quarter mile if you want to. I wouldn't advise to it, and I wouldn't put it on anything faster than a quarter mile. I wouldn't even put it on a fast circuit, but anything that has like more than 5 turns, the Nissan Leaf Nismo is a fantastic bargain for your buck. This is one of my most used cars when it comes to clubs, and it just been introduced to the game. I mean, just in quotation marks, but it's the most recent update car, JPT. Lancia Beta Monte Carlo comes next if it's Italian in clubs, and it's always Italian clubs. Like, I know that the Big Six is always utilized, but it feels like Italy and Japan are just so much more used over the other, countries in the Big Six. So the Lancia Beta Monte Carlo, it comes in useful because it's very low RQ, low ground clearance, performance tires, and it brings 86 handling to the table. Then we have the Dodge Slingshot. This is like the go-to American twisty car for uncommons. It's a fantastic little machine. Not only American car, just in general, because it's so incredibly light, and it has 92 handling for an uncommon. Not only 92 handling, but 92 handling for an RQ23, for a lower RQ uncommon, which is insane. We also have the Alfa Giulia GTA Stradale. It brings good handling to the table, it's a lightweight car, and most importantly, it's medium, baby. Moving on now, we have the Dodge D100. Now, this is like if it's standard tire times 5 in clubs, there's Dragon City, or there's Speed of Light, and the RQ limit is very low. I love to go with the D100. This and the Mustang Boss are kind of like, the Lamborghini Miura. No, that's not a good example. It would be like, the Aston Martin Bulldog and the Charger 3. You got one car that deals with the quarter and half, and then you have another car that deals with the 1 mile and the test bowl. To be fair though, when it comes to half mile, the Boss is better. But then again, this has the standard tire niche, and this is the car that I would use for quarter mile anywhere in clubs when it comes to low RQ uncommons only, anywhere around those niches. Then we have the Chevrolet S10 Extreme. The Chevrolet S10 Extreme is one of those uncommons that I use almost everywhere, every time. It has so many weird little niches. First of all, it handles well. Second of all, a low 0 to 60. Third of all, it has medium ground clearance. And then it also has the pickup niche. Now, the pickup niche is kind of like the eco-friendly niche in clubs. It comes out once every 3 months, so you're not going to see it too often. But it also has another niche, which is it's a 2-seater. There you go, seat count 2. There are not a lot of 2-seaters that are medium ground clearance. There are a lot of 2-seaters that are coupes, that are performance-based, that are low ground clearance. Those are a dime a dozen. But what makes this unique is that it's a 2-seater, but it's also medium ground clearance, and you can save so much RQ on this. Whenever there's Dragon City and like the RQ limit is like 300 around those range, I would just put in, like, if I can, like 3 Bugattis, right? And then I would just put in 2 Chevrolet S10 Extremes. This is like one of the best bargain savers in general. So one of the amazing, fantastic uncommon car. It's also a Blossom choice, and I think it will be Blossom choice forever, unless there is something that ends up being better. I mean, the only way there's a car that would be better than this is a car that exactly is this, but handles a little better, like 75. But yeah, moving on now. Subaru Impreza 4-wheel drive standard handles well, medium ground clearance, and it is an estate. To be fair though, like I said, the estate niche never comes out in clubs, so that doesn't mean much. Saloon means a lot, but it is a 5-seater, so the 5-seater niche does come up a lot in clubs, so that is a check. So 5-seater niche, check. Standard tire niche, check. Japan niche, check. Subaru niche, check. There's a lot. A lot of these cars, what they have in common is that they kind of just fill out a lot of requirements. Like, you can use them in multiple different requirements in clubs, which means that you can use them very often. Nissan Patrol comes next because it's a 4-wheel drive all-surface tire car. There are not a lot of uncommons that have this, so it's a car that I would use for basically anything off-road for uncommon days in clubs. But I think the best one is going to be the Bluebird, and we'll talk about that in a bit. The Bluebird has kind of overshadowed all the all-surface tire ones. The Mazda Rx-7 is next. Good hybrid car, low ground clearance performance, an okay 0 to 60, and good handling. Moving on is the Maserati Mexico. The only reason why the Maserati Mexico is here is because it's the best uncommon car for the test bowl. That's it. But it's the best car in something, so it's going to be featured. It's still a good car for the 1 mile, the half mile, and the quarter mile. It's just that it isn't the best. But it's a good like B team, C team car. And when it comes to test bowl, there is one track set. There is one, I think there's two. There are two speed of light track sets in clubs where there is a test bowl on every track. So when it is speed of light, the Maserati Mexico is actually an A-team car because it's the best car for the test bowl, and there are track sets that exist in clubs where there's a test bowl on every single track set. So the Mexico would be the best car in every single track set and every single race that you do. So it is a useful car in that regard. The Ford Explorer Sport Track, the only reason why it's here is because it fills out the four-wheel drive niche. So when it's four-wheel drive in clubs and it's dry, this is actually a really good car to use. If it's dry four-wheel drive and it's very low RQ, or you want to save RQ, or it's like Dragon City and you want to use a high/medium ground clearance car, this would be a really good car to use actually, because not only is it four-wheel drive and performance tires, it also brings good stats to the table, it handles well, and it has a high ground clearance, and it's a pickup. But like I said, those niches don't come up too often. It also is a 5-seater as well, so if you want to save, so let's say it's like times 5 5-seaters in clubs, Dragon City, and you want to save some RQ because you want to use obviously the highest RQ cars for the drags because that's where you win the most points. This wouldn't be a bad car to use for that because it has medium ground clearance, but there are better options out there. This is mainly for the four-wheel drive niche. Moving on now is the Fiat Stilo Schumacher GP. Like I said, Italian events are so heavily skewed in clubs. Like, I know that there are French events, American events, British events, Japanese events, but it always seems that Italian and Japan are always the two most common countries out of the big six. And you know, when it comes to Italian cars, there are not a lot of options to use. Most of them are dragsters. So the Fiat Stilo is different because it handles well and it's medium ground clearance. It's a great little medium RQ uncommon for the Italian ranks. Moving on now is the Nissan Toronto. Like I said, there's a lot of front wheel drive events in clubs as well, just like when I said that there are a lot of rear wheel drive events in clubs. So let's say there's front wheel drive times 5 and it's a very, very low RQ and you want to save some RQ for the off-road. Like usually it's used in like desert sands when like every single track in the track set is off-road and it's very low RQ, so you can't use like 5 Opel Corsas or 5 Opel Adams or 5 Suzuki Swifts, none of that, right? Then the Toronto would be a good place to save some RQ. So you can use maybe, this is a car that you use so you can use 3 Opel Corsas in the same hand to fit. So front wheel drive, all surface tires, and it handles well. Don't expect it to win much for you. The only reason why it's good is because it will save you a lot of RQ. So some of these cars are bargains, I would say, but they're good because they're really good bargains. Ford Mustang Boss 302 is not a bargain though. I mean, it is, but also it brings a lot of use to the table. This is a car that you would use a lot in clubs. Basically anything uncommon or even rare and uncommon, because sometimes we see times 3 rare, times 2 uncommon in clubs. Ford Mustang Boss 302, one of the best cars to use, okay? 80 MRI on this bad boy. Top speed, not very high, but good enough for the lower ranks. 0 to 60 is low. It's a great car to use. Speed of light uncommon, I'm always using the Boss 302. Dragon City uncommon, I'm always using the Boss 302. Even some Storm Chasers, because there are 2 Storm Chaser track sets in clubs where it's basically just all dragged anyway. Anything with a drag where you can only use uncommons or the RQ limit is very, very low, I would use the Ford Mustang 302. This is one of my most used cars in clubs. Then we have the Pujo 406 Coupe. This is a nice little all-rounder, especially for French events in clubs. It handles well, top speed is high, and the 0 to 60 is respectable. The only thing that you need to note is that it is low ground clearance. So this isn't a car that you can put on city streets medium, but this is a nice little hybrid. I would say I don't like to value hybrids that much, but this one is one of the better ones for sure. Moving on now is the Nissan Micra. So this goes hand in hand with the Nissan Leaf that I talked about earlier on in the video, the RQ23. This is the best one for city streets, small. So basically, once again, anything city living in clubs, anything Dragon City in clubs, anything that requires a medium ground clearance car, this would be a fantastic car to use. But outside of the medium niche, it's still a good car for a twisty road, hairpin, because it handles well, and the 0 to 60 is relatively low, but the main thing is also it's a very lightweight car, and it's medium. Now moving on is the Nissan Datsun Bluebird. Now this is going to be one of the best cars, I would say. Like if I could, like, you know that video I did with Cannonball where we ranked the best of the best? This would be top 3. uncommons, in my opinion. Nissan Datsun Bluebird, fantastic, because once again, off-road tires, handles well, medium ground clearance, rear-wheel drive, so that's a rear-wheel drive niche, that's the Japan niche, Nissan niche, off-road niche, basically anything off-road tires, medium niche, and it is saloon. And rear-wheel drive niche, and two-seater niche. This thing is ridiculous, okay? It's actually like, it is the perfect club car, because we always see saloon in clubs. We always see, well, we don't always see two-seaters, but we do see two-seaters in clubs from time to time. We see petrol, so that works as well. We see off-road every day. You know, rear-wheel drive is very often a requirement that we see in clubs. Japanese cars, once again, it's very biased. There's always Japanese events in clubs, either Japanese or Italian, so that's going to be a really good car to use. And then the Ford Taurus show is my go-to hybrid saloon, because it brings great handling to the table. It is a saloon and a relatively low 0 to 60 and high top speed and not atrocious MRA. It's not good, but not atrocious. So this is my hybrid saloon, and this is my fast saloon. So whenever there's saloon events in clubs or a 5-seater event in clubs, the Citroen CX GTI is going to be my go-to dragster, because obviously if it's a saloon times 5 in clubs and is low RQ, or it's what's the other one, 5-seater events in clubs and is low RQ, you can't use the Mustang Boss, because the Mustang Boss obviously is a muscle car, it's a 4-seater, it's a coupe, but you can use the CX because it has amazing MRA, high top speed, and the 0 to 60 is okay, it's good enough for its niche. So once again, saloon 5-seater, right? So a lot of good niches in that as well. Also, if you want to use a front-wheel drive dragster to save RQ, the Citroen CX GTI Turbo is actually a really good car to use. Because the one thing about front-wheel drive cars is that most of the front-wheel drive cars in top drives are like hatchbacks, right? They handle well. All of them handle quite well, but all of them have no MRA. So when it comes to the drag, the Citroen CX GTI Turbo actually stands out because it is a front-wheel drive car with MRA. So once again, it has a lot of niches. I get a lot of use out of it. I mean, when you think about it, let's check off the list once again, right? French, you got that niche. Front wheel drive, you got that niche. Saloon, you got that niche. Medium, you got that niche. Like, it's actually a really, really useful car that I use a lot in clubs. We have the Volkswagen Jetta. Whenever there's standard tire events in clubs, or, you know, any rain events like Storm Chaser, California Storm, or any German events, or once again saloon events, the Volkswagen Jetta is a car I like to use. Has traction control, ABS, it handles well, standard tires, and medium ground clearance. And then we move on to the final few cars here, I think the final 8 cars or so. We have the Volkswagen Corrado 16V. Now, one thing that's really weak when it comes to the German meta is that there are not a lot of good uncommons. The best one is the Volkswagen Corrado 16V, and it's not even Blossom Choice, because when you think about it, the best of the UK is 7276. The best of Japan is like 7577, and then this one is 80. That's a very, very low 0 to 60. I mean, a very, very high 0 to 60, like a bad 0 to 60. High top speed though, and the handling is alright. It is low ground clearance, but it is quite lightweight. This is basically a car that I use basically just in German events and clubs, front wheel drive events. It's quite useful there. Then we have the Twizy with the best of France, right? 6.0, 70 handling, and how light is it? Yeah, 474 kgs. Insane. Obviously this car needs no introduction. It's a car that I use all the time in clubs. We have the Nissan Fairlady. This is the best uncommon for the twisty circuit, but that's about it though, because it loses to the slalom, to, like, you know, the Twizy or even the Slingshot. But the Nissan Fairlady is the best car for the twisty circuit, and you can get a lot of good value out of this. It's a good car to put on the fast circuit as well. Not the best, but it's a good car to put there. Good handling, low 0 to 60, and once again very lightweight. And then we have the Mazda Eunice Roadster. This is my go-to high RQ standard tire car for uncommon in clubs, even when I want to just save RQ. Like, once again, it's kind of like the Mustang Boss, right? Where even if it's very high RQ, I mean, a good example would be a Storm Chaser, because there is one Storm Chaser that I know where there are 3 fast track sets and 2 twisty track sets, and basically, like, the main thing about clubs is that you want to put all your RQ investments into the fast track sets. You want to get in the fastest cars with the best MRA with the highest RQs. Well, they tend to usually have high RQs. So, you know, cars like Bugattis or Koenigsegg's or Remax or even Hellcats. You know, so you want to save RQs in other places, and you want to save RQs in the twisty areas. And this is a great car to save RQ with, because standard tires, 90 handling, very lightweight, and it has a lot of niches. Convertible niche, but then again, we don't see convertibles times 5s in clubs at all, but we do see rear-wheel drive a lot, and this is also, I do believe, a 2-seater, so there you go, and it has standard tires. And anything to do with uncommon, this would be a fantastic car to use. The final 4 will be the Lotus Europa. This is like one of the best, I would say, all-rounders, the best hybrid cars in clubs. Great handling, lightweight, and a low 0 to 60. It's a car that I would even deploy on the quarter mile and the fast circuit, but I wouldn't put it on a half mile and above, never, because the top speed 121, that's really bad. Also, it's 60s, so that's another niche that you see in clubs sometimes. You see pre-70s in clubs sometimes. Lancia Beta Coupe, because like I said, Italian events and clubs show up more than any other country. This, Italian and Japan, and this would be the best car to use for Italian medium ground clearance uncommon. It's medium ground clearance, of course, goes without saying, handles well, a low 0 to 60, and it's lightweight as well. And then the last two that I would talk about would be the BMW 728i. This is a bit of a sleeper, I would say. As Oliver, he can tell you all about it. Not good handling. The 0 to 60 isn't the best as well. On paper stats doesn't make this car look too good. I mean, when you compare it to like, what's another medium ground clearance standard tire car I have? Like the Volt. 70 handling to 78. And with the same 0 to 60, you would think, why is this here? But this is a bit of a sleeper car. You can get value out of this. Also, it is a saloon and a 5-seater. And last but not least is the Chevrolet Volt. Medium ground clearance still, even though it shares the same body style, or it shares the same chassis as the Cadillac ELR, but the ELR is low. But yeah, it handles very well. It still is medium ground clearance. It is a hatchback, so we never see that in clubs, but it is a 5-seater, so you can use it there. So whenever it's like Storm Chaser, Uncommon, US, the Chevrolet Volt will be one of the best cars to use because it handles so well, it's standard tires, and it's medium ground clearance. But in my opinion, these are the biggest cash cows in clubs. These are the cars that I always look back to when I want to play clubs or on common events. These are the ones, and obviously if we add rare, then the Charger. The Charger's always here for the ride. But now let's get rid of rare again, and I want to go into my cars, and I'm going to show you what I got. So everything here is maxed. You can pause the video whenever you want if you want to see these cars maxed. And as you can see, a lot of them I have duplicates. So we start with the Daytona. I got 2 of those. We got the Leaf. I got 3 of those. We have the Slingshot. 3 of those. The Nissan Patrol Nismo, that didn't show up, did it? I don't remember talking about the Patrol Nismo and the Ford Ranger. But yeah, these two are also very useful for all surface tire events and clubs because they handle well. 77 handling and 76 handling. Also SUV events and clubs, they do show up from time to time. These cars, well, not this one, but the Patrol Nismo would be useful in. We have 2 Dodge D100s, 4 Chevrolet S10 Extremes. I use these cars a lot, okay? So 530 races, that probably isn't the best representation. I do have some over, I think, 1,000 almost. Yeah, 845, so this one is over 1,000. Yeah, 1,113 races. Now, I know the win ratio isn't high, but like I said, these are cars that I just use to save RQ so I can use Bugatti somewhere else. I feel like using Bugatti somewhere else is a bit outdated now, isn't it? Bugattis aren't the best MRA cars anymore, so I can use like a Volkswagen IDR somewhere else. But I don't have that, so I guess I can use a Koenigsegg Jesko somewhere else. I have 2 Subaru Imprezas, 2 Mazda Rx-7, so obviously since these cars are so useful, I have duplicates of a lot of them. I have 4 Ford Mustang Boss, 2 Micras, 4 Datsun Bluebird. Did I say 4 Mustang Boss? I meant 3, sorry, I can't count. I have 2 Citroen CX GCI Turbos, 3 Twizzys, 2 Fairladies, 4 Eunice Roadsters, and 2 Europas to, cap things off. So these, in my opinion, are the cash cows when it comes to uncommon and clubs. Stay tuned for rares, super rares, ultra rares, and epics, and let me know if you like this series, and the most important thing is, let me know if you find this series helpful. If it's not helpful, then there's no point for me to make it. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly, got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly, got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to Jacksonville
Atlantic.
Blonde hair, don't care, look like Leslie Brooks. Pin up girls everywhere with the drop that look, swing it side to side as we slow dance to the night. When I'll hold your perfect hand and take you out just for a ride. We'll share milkshakes at the diner and rebel at every